The Silk Roads of Eurasia are the lifeline of the world economy, and also one of the most important routes of cultural exchange in the history of humanity. Consequently, their heartland of Central Asia has always been an iridescent diadem of cultural, economic, and religious diversity. Of the many vibrant Central Asian civilizations that rose and fell throughout the ages, one of the most fascinating can be found in what is now eastern Uzbekistan, northern Tajikistan, and southern Kyrgyzstan. This region was known historically as Sogdiana, the home of Alexander the Great's wife Roshanak. Sogdiana was one of the central nodes of the Silk Roads, home to both nomads and city dwellers that were the secret behind each heartbeat of Eurasian globalization. The native Sogdians, an Eastern Iranian people related to the Persians, are a storied nation responsible for producing some of the most beautiful art and religious mixture in the ancient world. Who were the Sogdians? What was their secret to dominating the Silk Roads, and how did they come to create such beautiful late antique art? Welcome to our video on the history of the Sogdians, their magnificent culture, and their myriad religions. This video is sponsored by our YouTube members and patrons, who get 2 exclusive videos weekly, not available anywhere else, for their kind support of our channel. You can join their ranks to watch more than 160 videos, including our series on the Pacific War, Punic Wars, Persian Wars, Spanish War of Succession, Russo-Japanese War, North African Campaign of World War II, History of Prussia, Italian Unification Wars, Risorgimento, Albigensian Crusades, and much more. Click the link in the description or pinned comment to get the exclusive videos, early access to all public videos, our schedule, wallpapers, access to a special Discord server where we're very active, and much more. Thanks for supporting us, we couldn't be doing it without your help. The region of Sogdiana lies primarily between the Sir Darya and Amu Darya rivers, known to the Greeks as the Jaxartes and Oxus respectively. The region covers most of the homonymous Sogd region in northern Tajikistan, and is blessed with a lush natural geography characterized by beautiful rivers and fertile green valleys. Other parts of Sogdiana include the regions of Samarkand and Bukhara in modern-day Uzbekistan, 2 important cities which were once inhabited by Sogdians in the antique period. Sogdiana has been a key location in Eurasian trade for millennia, connecting the prestigious civilizations of China, India, Persia, and the Mediterranean. The Sogdians were an Eastern Iranian people who spoke a language called Sogdian, which was closely related to Scythian. The Sogdians had a complex relationship with their Persian brethren, who sometimes perceived them to be part of the broader Iranian world, but also denigrated them as unruly and untamable upstarts. Sogdia's early history is shrouded in mystery. The region has been inhabited by humans since at least the Stone Age, with archaeological evidence of large settlement sites, like Sarazm, being dated back to the Neolithic period. We are unsure of who the people who lived in settlements like Sarazm were, but it is likely that they were the partial ancestors of the Sogdians and other Iranian groups similar to their relatives in the nearby Bactria-Margiana archaeological complex. The land of Sogdiana also appears in various ancient Zoroastrian sources, such as the Vendidad section of the sacred text called the Avesta. There it is mentioned as one of the Arayanam Vaja, the 16 good lands that the Zoroastrian god Ahura Mazda created for the Iranian peoples. During the era of classical antiquity, while their Western Persian cousins were forging the mighty Achaemenid Empire, the mixed sedentary and nomadic peoples of Sogdiana grew in number, and the size of their settlements increased. In the 500s BCE, the Shahanshah of the Achaemenid Empire, Cyrus the Great, took over the region and turned it into part of a satrapy, most likely Bactria. As the easternmost frontier of the Achaemenid realm, Sogdia was one of the Persian Empire's most unstable and rebellious territories. Nevertheless, the Sogdians sent troops to aid King Xerxes in his invasions of Greece. However, they revolted during the reign of Artaxerxes II a few decades later and threw off the yoke of their Persian masters. For the next few generations, Sogdiana became an independent region, controlled by various local warlords, until their former Achaemenid overlord was smashed by Greece's most ambitious general, Alexander the Great of the Macedonians. The arrival of Alexander the Great brought a difficult time for the Sogdian people at first. As the Greeks marched eastward and encountered more and more unruly terrain and unruly people, they became harsher in their treatment of the locals. Alexander's army committed atrocities as he passed through the mountains of Sogdiana. He faced stiff and stubborn resistance from local Sogdian rulers, including a man known in Greek records as Spitamenes. Some of Alexander's more famous battles were fought against the Sogdians. One of these was the Siege of the Sogdian Rock, in which the Macedonian monarch took his future wife Roshanak, daughter of the Sogdian noble Oxyates, hostage. Many of the local Sogdians, like the aforementioned Spitamenes, were killed in battle, and the Sogdians eventually submitted to Greek terror. After Alexander pacified Sogdiana, the Greeks utilized a partial accommodation strategy to incorporate the Sogdian people into the Macedonian Empire. As Sogdiana during this period appeared to consist of local equestrian chieftains, this meant ensuring some of them had allegiance to him and his generals through marriage alliances. It also meant that he had to ensure these chieftains could feel that their autonomy was maintained. For instance, many local Sogdians were allowed to rule as satraps of the region. Moreover, Alexander married the aforementioned Sogdian noblewoman Roshanak, while Spitamenes' daughter Apama married one of his generals, Seleucus. The death of Alexander resulted in the region coming under the control of one of his generals, Seleucus I Nicator, a Macedonian statesman who utilized a strategy of forming connections with Persian nobles from the former Achaemenid Empire to maintain stability throughout his vast Asian realm. As such, he sent his elder son, Antiochus, whose mother was the Sogdian noblewoman Apama, to rule the so-called northern provinces of the Seleucid realm, which included his maternal homeland of Sogdia. The fact that Seleucus made a half-Sogdian the ruler of Sogdiana speaks of an attempt to pacify the locals. However, we are unsure how connected Antiochus was to his mother's culture and language. Eventually, these northern provinces broke off, when the satrap Diodotos I separated from the Seleucids and founded the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. This is a fascinating topic we also have done a video on, as we have also done one on the successors of the Greeks in Central Asia, the Parthians and the Scythians. As a quick overview, a satrap of the Seleucids called Diodotos broke off from the Seleucids in the 250s BCE, establishing a large kingdom covering Bactria and Sogdiana. This dynasty ruled for about a century and was a major trading nexus, before slowly fragmenting due to both internal revolts and nomadic incursions. During this politically turbulent period, further seeds for Sogdia's future were planted, for new cultural influences from Greece and Persia were injected into the local culture. These seeds would bloom in brilliant cultural development during the later periods of Sogdian history. Sometime in the 1st century BCE, the Indo-Scythian kingdom seized most of Sogdiana and incorporated it into its domains for a very brief period. The Scythian period in Sogdian history is a bit muddled in the historical record, but the Scythians were soon superseded by a more powerful force, the Kushan Empire. The mighty Kushan realm was founded by a tribe of nomads called the Yuezhi, an Indo-European people who likely shared ancestry with the Sogdians. The Yuezhi broke through the Taklamakan Desert in the 1st century CE and thundered southwards, until they founded an empire stretching from Bactria to central India. Sogdia was in the periphery of this empire, and was likely under the control of what is called the Kangju Confederacy in Chinese sources. The Kangju appear to have been some sort of quasi-nomadic group with mysterious social organization, with only its chieftains being obvious in archaeological research. This confederacy seems to have been some sort of autonomous vassal of the Kushans, though we have no records from the period discussing the matter in depth. As the Kushans declined, the confederacy became ever more autonomous, before turning into the city-states of the late antique period. The Kushans are traditionally seen as middlemen in Eurasian trade, but in fact they were active producers and agricultural, mercantile and urbanization developers for their empire, according to scholars like Lauren Morris. This economic growth propelled the Sogdians to move into cities and become merchants, getting more in touch with Eurasian trade routes. By the 3rd to 4th centuries CE, the Kushan Empire began to slowly fragment, before being replaced by the Sasanians, and eventually the White Huns and the Hephthalites. By this time, the Kangju had declined and disintegrated, allowing a tapestry of small Sogdian statelets to seize their independence, such as the Kudas of Bukhara and the Kingdom of Fergana. Although under the suzerainty of rulers like the Hephthalites, these city-states were largely autonomous, and at times completely independent from them. The Sogdians during this period were what the historian Judith Lerner calls influences on the Silk Roads, for they were some of the most important traders of Eurasia. From the 4th to 7th century CE, the Sogdians played this seminal role as traders of the Silk Roads. During this era, the Sogdians were Eurasia's most prestigious middleman, trading silk, jewels and art from India to Tang Dynasty China to Persia to Byzantium. Naturally, the Sogdians grew fabulously wealthy in this trade, and as a result, Sogdian cities like Panjakent, Samarkand and Panjakent became bustling cosmopolises. In these vibrant cultural centres, various Silk Road religions, such as Manichaeism and Buddhism, arrived and were then adopted by the native Sogdians, who then enthusiastically spread these faiths into the four corners of the earth. Let us now take a step out of the flow of time and explore what Sogdian society looks like during its golden age, at the epicenter of the Silk Road. Although many Sogdians had lived nomadic lives in earlier eras, Sogdian society had become largely urbanized in the 4th to 7th centuries AD. This resulted in a highly stratified society, with kings and queens ruling over each city, presiding over a small elite clique of aristocrats and wealthy merchants who controlled the lion's share of the wealth. We know very little about the internal politics of Sogdian cities. What we do know is that the Sogdians were famous for their trade skills and their production of great art, which was used for both religious and secular ends. Sogdian art was a regional hub of vibrancy and colour, as evidenced by their beautiful reliefs. Elaborate and ornate metallurgy was also a major specialty of the Sogdians, building upon centuries of metallurgical tradition in the region with influences from India, Hellenistic Greece, China and Persia. This polyvalency in art is one of the strongest points of Sogdian culture. They were always able to take other influences and forge their own uniquely local and new artistic vogues. The Sogdians had relations in both diplomacy and via expatriate communities with surrounding regions, as we have diplomatic correspondence with China from the 7th century CE. These expatriate communities traded materials, finished goods, and tragically enslaved humans. We also have a rich corpus of Sogdian literature, which was written in a variant of the Aramaic script that was used in the Achaemenid and Parthian empires. As a byproduct of their mercantile skills, the Sogdians seem to have had a relatively high level of literacy for the era. Some Sogdian letters which have survived into the modern era were written by women, an unusual phenomenon in an ancient world otherwise dominated by patriarchal cultures, where the overwhelming majority of educated elites were men. One example of this comes from a 4th century CE expatriate woman called Mune, who was abandoned by her useless trader husband in the Chinese city of Dunhuang. 1,700 years later, the fury Mune feels towards her deadbeat husband is still palpable in her writing. "Behold, I am living, badly, not well, wretchedly, and I consider myself dead. Again and again I send you a letter, but I do not receive a single letter from you, and I have become without hope towards you. My misfortune is this, that I have been in Dunhuang for 3 years thanks to you, and there was a way out a first, a second, even a 5th time, but he refused to bring me out. In my paternal abode, I did not have such a restricted life as with you. I obeyed your command and came to Dunhuang, and I did not observe my mother's bidding nor my brother's. Surely the gods were angry with me on the day when I did your bidding. I would rather be a dog's or a pig's wife than yours." Besides their magnificent art and culture, the Sogdians were sophisticated connoisseurs of religion. Many religions that became popular due to trade on the Silk Roads took root in Sogdiana, from where they spread further into the philosophy-torn battlegrounds of Eurasia. Most Sogdians were content to stick with the religions of their ancestors, the Eastern Iranian pantheons of Central Asia. This collection of beliefs was close to the Zoroastrian religion of their Persian siblings, with which it shared several similarities. One of these was the use of elevated ossuaries to bury the bones of the dead after vultures had picked the flesh from the cadaver. However, there were many differences, with the main one being that the Sogdians were polytheists who worshipped many naturalistic deities, while their Iranian cousins to the south were monotheists, focused on Ahura Mazda, the god of light. One prominent Sogdian deity was Nana, a fertility and nature goddess who appears in a beautiful mural from the city of Panjakent, depicted to be holding the sun and moon while riding a lion. This image is interesting because it has clear influences from the Indian deity Durga. Indeed, the Sogdians drew heavy artistic influence from the rich civilizations of India. In fact, such importance was placed on Indian art that the scholar Franz Grenit famously termed the deities of Sogdia as Iranian gods in Hindu garb. In addition, deities like Weshpakar, the god of the wind, were also important. Although most Sogdians worshipped a multitude of gods, each Sogdian city had its own patron deity which they favored over others. it is also safe to say that our more familiar form of monotheistic Zoroastrianism was present in the region. Besides the sects of Iran, a major faith that was present in Sogdia was Manichaeism, that Silk Road dualist religion that merged Buddhist, Christian and Zoroastrian cosmologies. Though at times Sogdian city-states repressed the faith, Manichaeans nonetheless secured a strong foothold in the region, having bishoprics in the region since the time of the apostle Mar-Ammo in the 3rd century CE. Sogdian Manichaeans practiced a unique branch of the faith, and even underwent a schism from the religion's headquarters in Ctesiphon in the 6th century CE. Sogdians were primarily responsible for introducing the Manichaean faith into China, where it would endure for centuries, and even play a foundational role in the rebel movement that overthrew the Mongol Empire in the 14th century AD. Christianity and Buddhism were also present in Sogdia, specifically their Mahayana and Assyrian varieties respectively. Both of these faiths, as well as Manichaeism, translated their holy texts into the influential Sogdian language, and Sogdian translations of the Christian Bible or of major Mahayana Buddhist sutras survive to this day. These translations had impacts on what was considered intellectual canon in China, where many of these faiths ended up. Other minority faiths present in Sogdia include Judaism, particularly the ancestors of the eloquent Bukharan Jewish community, and various strands of Hinduism, like Shaivism. Despite the dominance of the Eastern Iranian pantheons, the Sogdians clearly knew how to throw a religious party in their home territories. The sunset of Late Antique Sogdia occurred in the 6th to 8th centuries CE, when the city-states came under the suzerainty of the Turkic Confederacy known as the Gökturks. During this period, the Eurasian trade routes upon which the Sogdians thrived continued on relatively uninterrupted, but soon major cultural and political changes were underway. In the 600s, the Islamic Caliphate managed to unify the Arabian Peninsula and stormed out from their home peninsula, conquering Sasanian Persia in its wake. By the 700s, the Umayyads began to march eastwards from recently conquered Transoxiana and seized cities in Sogdiana, taking Samarkand in 722 CE. Despite pleas from Sogdian nobles for assistance from Tang dynasty China, no help would manifest. By the late 700s, most of the region was officially under the control of the Islamic Umayyad and later Abbasid caliphates. For many Sogdians, the Islamic conquest did not impact their daily lives. They continued to move across Central Asia as traders. However, the influx of Islamic influence produced some hybrid religious traditions that merged Islam and Zoroastrianism, and were used by local prophets to turn discontent into rebellions. Some of the hybrid Islamic Zoroastrian revolutionaries during the period of Abu Muslim appear to have operated in Sogdia. For instance, Al-Mukanna, who some scholars claim was of Sogdian descent, claimed to be an incarnation of God, with some influences in his descriptions reminiscent of the messianic Buddha of the future, Maitreya. Despite these revolts, slowly the crescent of Nana gave way to the crescent of the Quran. Sogdian culture was transformed into something new. While the independent Sogdian city-states came under Islamic control, the cities themselves continued to be bustling hubs of trade, eventually becoming the capitals of new Persian empires. In fact, the Samanid Empire, which ushered in the new Persianate cosmopolitan culture, was partially based in Sogdiana. Thus, Islamization did not erase the Sogdians. It merely transformed them into a new form of cultural splendor, as the Greeks and Kushans had done before. After the Islamic conquests, the region of Sogdiana, as it is known in the late antique period, was transmuted into the Samanid Empire, a powerful domain which presided over a flourishing of Islamic Persianate culture. Sogdian culture has survived into our current era, with the modern-day linguistic descendants of the Sogdians, the Yagnobis, still living in modern-day Tajikistan. Sogdiana is often remembered uncharitably as just a place where one passed through on their way to Constantinople or Chang'an. However, cities like Samarkand and Panjakent were just as glamorous and culturally rich as the great capitals of China and Eastern Rome. The traders of Sogdiana were some of the finest on the Silk Roads, and they also managed to transmit endless religious and philosophical texts of the late antique period. The Sogdians are one of the most interesting cultures in the ancient world. From their many deities to their beautiful cities, the Sogdians encompass the whole of the Silk Road's beauty, creativity, as well as contradictions. In this way, their story is as luscious as the finest silk in the world. More videos on the ancient cultures of Central Asia are on the way. To make sure that you don't miss them, please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing. It helps immensely. Our videos would not be possible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.